Welcome to the virtual Jewel Box podcast of the Tanner Humanities Center. I'm Erin Beeghly, Associate Professor of Philosophy at the University of Utah, and today I'm delighted to welcome Nora Lange to discuss her new book of short stories, Daycare. Nora is also the author of Us Fools, published in 2024, which was awarded the Sue Kaufman Prize for First Fiction by the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award for Fiction. Us Fools was cited as proof that the great American novel still exists in the New York Times, and it was a Los Angeles Times bestseller. And critics have been falling all over themselves to praise this new collection, too. Joy Williams calls your prose smart and surprising, invigoratingly icy and delicious. And Maggie Smith says, quote, "Daycare has made me greedy. Now I want to see more of the world, more of our beautiful batshit existence through Nora Lange's lens." So, Nora, my first question for you, just welcome. And how does it feel to be basking in all of this praise? And how has the reception been so far?
It has been called delicious 4 times, I've counted, which I think is really odd, but makes me happy. I tend to not bask very much. I have a 3.5-year-old, Erin, as you know. So when I read one of your questions earlier that was like, what's on your nightstand? I thought, Kleenex, cough drops, baby toy. I was like, this is a good point to fictionalize. But to not fictionalize, I haven't been basking too much. It's more just kind of the day-to-day. What's my travel schedule like? How am I getting one place to the next? And right now, I am back-to-back places for this book tour. So I'm looking at not a lot of sleep, which gratefully my toddler has trained me for.
Well, I was hoping that we could introduce readers to some of your prose. Would you read some of your story, Hotspot, for us?
Absolutely. So Hotspot was excerpted in The New Yorker, part of their flash fiction 100-year anniversary, flash fiction summer issue. In any case, so I'll just read a little bit. Hotspot. The younger sister, one of 2 siblings, sat at her desk with a view of the park and counted swollen pigeons. She should have been applying for jobs, but the sister no longer had high-speed internet. The brother had stopped paying for it. He had to draw the line somewhere. He had no intention of bailing her out again, and he said as much to her over the phone. The sister had made a habit of sketching babies and watching pigeons eat trash in a park rather than uploading her resume. However, he would continue to pay her phone bill. For months, the steady older brother in Hoboken, with resources, had paid her rent, and now he scolded her during their weekly check-in call. The sister resisted mentioning that he would bail her out. The brother worshipped the feeling he would succumb to this need to be needed. She may have been creative, jobless, and living in a dingy, beloved studio in faraway Brooklyn, but she understood him. Theirs was the sort of familiarity that could pass only between siblings, each competing to survive. Quiet. She hushed the brother. The pigeons had cleverly discovered something underneath a stroller and were making efforts to dislodge it from the wheels. From her perch, it appeared to her to be lasagna. Those long, thick noodles were unmistakable. The brother talked as the pigeons nibbled away, and a new desire rash began forming on the sister's left knee. The latest, more of an auburn, complemented the earlier pink splotch that now covered her other knee. "You're exhausting," he said to her during their weekly check-in call. He was right. She had observed that wearing people out, stripping them of their energies, which allowed them to think clearly, was how successful people such as the brother managed to pilfer all the resources. The brother had been the one to suggest that the sister use her phone as a hotspot. He liked knowing something about technology. It made him feel in touch. Like back when he went clubbing with the cool kids hell-bent on dying young, because that was the point. She thought the point was to be an artist.
Thanks, Nora.
My pleasure.
So I read this story when it was excerpted last summer, and I don't know if we can talk about the ending. Is that a spoiler?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Yeah. So the ending is like very surreal. And this is, I think, one of the really special things about your style is there's this like surrealism. But the woman has, I don't know, turns into this pulsing kind of just desire. What would you say?
Spot.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of like I mean, black hole sounds so dark. When you really look at what a black hole is, it's not really dark, right? I mean, it's magnetic. It's just the inverse, the way we think of that, right? So, yeah, it's just another magnetism, I would say.
My reaction was that this was like a very relatable story. I don't know, maybe it was like summer. And it's also just like these characters have something that's like both longing, they're full of desire, but also kind of alienation. And I don't know, maybe it's just something about like last summer for me, you know, just at home, I've just felt it a lot. I was like, I want to turn it into like a throbbing, pulsing hotspot. This actually would feel like really good right now.
I think that is something that runs through the collection. It's probably female desire. Mm-hmm. And I think that for me, the character in this story, Hotspot, is quite literally tapping into that in a different way. And kind of she's deciding to sort of surrender herself to the sort of body version. And I think it plays on Kafka. It plays on, you know, metaphor. Whether she really does transform into a hotspot. You know, I think that she is almost like Carrie in the movie. She's just saying, here I am, but yet she's giving herself to herself. I mean, she's kind of in this position, this precarious position with her brother where she's going to kind of for always owe him something. And he's, of course, there to remind her of their dynamic, you know, that she's borrowed money and so on and so forth. So I think for her to kind of phantom disappear like a superhero into her own desire, be enveloped by her desire, is just like her transformation, her metamorphosis, you know.
That's amazing. Yeah. I wanted to talk about your prose. So your prose has been described as unpredictable and careening. So there's this sense of movement. And I was recently watching this comedy special by Nick Fleming, who is this very gender-bendy, physical humor person, fast-paced and full of surprises. And I read this review of their special, and the reviewer described them as, quote, marrying a wild improvisational sense of constantly flying off the handle with writerly precision. And I read that line and I thought, daycare. There were so many moments in this book when I was like, whoa, I didn't think we were going here, and now we're here, and just like just spinning fast, disorienting, but in this way that is just so full of pleasure. And I was wondering if the experience of writing these stories was like the experience I had of reading them, or like, how do you kind of do this really special thing?
Thank you. That's really very nice. Yeah, I feel like the word that comes to mind is mischief. And I think that in writing, a lot of the pleasure comes from a playfulness. And thinking about your world and like the work you do, Erin, you know, with stereotypes and pigeonholing people. Like, I don't really want to pigeonhole certain narrative ideas. And so sometimes I do turn things on their head, but sometimes that is like a post-production or editing, revision thing. But a lot of the time, it's actually just what's happening organically, and that I am a detective, sort of seeing what's happened, and I just kind of push it further, refine it. But yeah, I'd say that being playful and mischievous, both things are important. And it's helpful to also be reminded with a toddler, like they fall, right? They're not afraid necessarily to fall. They get up. And I think when we get older, as we grow older, we lose sort of some of that flexibility, that spontaneity to kind of make error. And so in some ways, I play with that with myself. My idea or thinking as a writer is to kind of just like turn that on its head a little bit, right?
One thing that I noticed as someone who studies stereotypes and sort of social roles was that sometimes people can be quite afraid, and rightly so, of these big social expectations and labels. But your characters seem to, I don't know, to inhabit their roles in a way that is kind of maybe not reckless. I think that there is actually a lot of reckless, like fabulous, reckless characters, but they're like not super weighed down by all of these expectations or don't really, or maybe they are, but they don't seem, they're just sort of like doing motherhood in their own way or doing friendship in their own way or being a sister in, I don't know.
That's probably like a kind of writerly omnipresent technique because it's not autobiography, even though I play with genre. I think that I'm like a cloud, right? Like that's how I position myself. Even if I'm writing in first person, it's not me, right? And I think that allows for a lightness to always kind of keep a kind of constellation or a circulation kind of moving through a story, even if often there is a more centered character from which where the POV is coming from. I mean, I do tend to, when I look back over stuff, realize that I'm leaning more toward, I can often be leaning more towards one character, be more sympathetic towards one over others. But generally speaking, I'm trying to kind of walk a kind of tightrope. But sometimes it's just really clearly that one's an asshole and then like one is less so.
So I want to switch gears and ask you about the titular story of this collection, Daycare. So do you want to tell viewers a bit about Daycare? This one is more like autofiction-ish.
So, of course, I am a fiction writer. And so Nick is the name of my husband. And his name shows up as Nick in this book. And I think, it'd be easy enough for me to call him Rick. But there's something about the way that it like grounds me, the Nick, to keep it as it is. And you're right, the autofiction elements that are true to form would be I was in Los Angeles. Nick is my husband. I do have a baby. I was working full time. My mother never came. There are like tons of things that are not. I never did a dating profile. In this story, this mother who's like single parenting, who basically says, I wasn't signed up for this. This is not what I had signed up for. Her husband takes a job in Salt Lake City, or well, I don't think that's not what it is in the story, but takes a job in Utah.
Orem.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you. Which is accurate. Yeah. And the mother character just is seeking daytime sex between the hours of her work job and picking up her child at daycare. And this came about, I can remember going to like a pen event. This is before the pen backlash. But in any case, I was telling my friend Louise Steinman in Los Angeles about the story, and we were just all just laughing. The story wasn't done yet. I just told him the premise, she and my friend Maureen, and we were all just like laughing. I was like, oh, it's so fun, to write this like wacky, because I don't know, like how outrageous, but also how profoundly simple. It's not like she's not dressing in something interesting and, she's just at home, just literally trying to fill a need to get laid between the hours of this and this,
Yeah, I love one of the details of that story, which is that the mother who's visiting from Oregon modifies the daughter's profile so that it's only people within 1 mile. And I'm just thinking, having lived in Los Angeles, I don't know, those details were kind of really delicious. And as soon as you open up the geographical range, then it's like, then it happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So and just trying to, I think so much as I'm writing this piece on motherhood as like an act of time travel. And that's been on my mind a lot and probably was on my mind a lot. And even if these stories are written over the course where there wasn't a child, right, of like, let's just say like 12 years, I've had a mother all that time. So I think that there's something interesting about, and I still have to think about how the placement of the stories are together, like which comes first, what's second, so on and so forth. I guess my point is that tucked inside a premise that's often humorous or like sassy is this real core of, emotionality, of really just one mother who finds herself single. But that's not the one you tell at a pen party that gets your Los Angeles friends laughing.
Yeah. And I think the flip side of that story is the partner, right, who's alone in Salt Lake City. And I remember Nick living in this like little windowless room, just wanting to be with his family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing about the Nick character in that some ways was based on him, like it was in lots of ways, and in other ways it was like some other like man in my mind. But at the end of it, I think speaks so much to their like compassionate connection, which I don't know that if you start the story, you know that it's going to end that way. And I think that it really does end that way. And I think even the final story in the collection ends on this other note too, which I think is more like a labyrinth of openings rather than a closing of tombs.
In terms of your own writing, I remember when my kid was that age, just feeling like I'm always on a clock. You drop them off and the clock starts. And you're like racing to get as much done as you possibly can. And there are never enough hours. So how is your writing going now? Are you pressing pause on writing because you have so much?
No. There's no pause. But I'd say like the ways that two things occur to me, right? One is I really work hard to be more forgiving because I get very stressed about not being able to complete the things I need to complete. But there's just, I also know there's like no way. So I have to step back and like just be like, well, I did the best I could. I really tried this day. And then the flip side is I have a very supportive in-laws such that for the holidays this season, they asked what I wanted. And I said for extended daycare hours so I could finish this book. And that was nice. They paid for that. It was interesting to me and had me pause and reflect was I would pick Sylvia up sometimes mostly actually just an hour later. But it was this 1 hour additional, even though I could do 3 hours additional, but the 1 hour just knowing that I had this other time meant that I used my time more efficiently, which I'm still like find pretty profound. Just knowing I had additional time meant that maybe I just felt less frantic.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So maybe I stubbed my toe less. I actually did put on pants, like whatever it meant. Like I didn't have to run back in the house 17 times because I feel frantic about the few hours I have to like squeeze it all in.
Exactly. I was never a procrastinator in college, and I always had to give myself a lot of time because my brain under big deadlines just kind of shuts down. Yeah. And so I relate to that a lot. Just having more expansive time in a day or, oh my God, in a week.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I feel like drawing my attention to like a deadline, right? Like I can feel like that about an appointment. Like if I have an appointment in a new place, I want extra time. And, someone else like Nick, for instance, he could care less. And he's like, why do you need 40 minutes to get to a place? It's only like 20 minutes away. But I just like that buffer, right? Like what if I take a wrong turn? Then I don't stress. And when I'm under that kind of pressure, I really do make errors, It's very I Love Lucy. That's the forgiving version.
So one more story I have to ask you about is Dog Star. This science fiction story. I can't even describe how it was to read this story. I was hanging on for dear life in this relationship. It was so bizarre. Like the main character doesn't have eyelids. People's flesh is decomposing off their bodies. People are blowing up. But I just loved it. And it actually struck me as kind of the science fiction version of this relationship in Us Fools, or like an iteration of it. And so how is it writing science fiction?
It's so funny. I would say I don't think of it that way, which is, it's an experiment, right? So I think of it like anything else, like raising a child actually is kind of an experiment. The way our DNA even comes together is, I guess, even down to that level, on a molecular level is an experiment. But I would say that for Dog Star specifically, it was, and I was thinking about this earlier today, but it was during COVID and we were in Oregon at the time helping family. And we were really, there were fires, like you couldn't go outside in this period. And I was editing the novel Us Fools. It was just my own revisions. It wasn't for publication or anything. And I was doing this other story, Dog Star, simultaneously. But Dog Star, the setting is, it's a community world in a snow globe, right? The perpetrators or like the powers be are those on like the outside versus those on the inside. So the people are figurines as they are in Dog Star, were assembled inside this snow globe to like please some sort of fantasy of those on the outside. And then, and then it became an experiment. Like, well, if they tinker, how do those on the outside tinker? Well, they have to drain the snow globes. How big are these snow globes? Well, they're pretty darn big. So like, then it becomes like a question of just practicality. So I could just hyper-fictionalize and just say, well, it happened because I said so. But actually, there's a real interest in looking at these things like puzzles, That's sort of a long, rambly answer. And there are other things that come to mind. But it was during COVID. We were on lockdown. And I wrote Dog Star as kind of an alternative to Us Fools.
Yeah, with some symmetries. Yeah,
yes.
So this makes me think of the Kirkus review of Daycare. So I did some just reading of the reviews. It says, the world of these stories is a grotesque mirror image of our own, where repressive gender roles are amplified to the point of comedy. And I actually had the opposite take.
I did too. I'm so curious about this person. I'm like, that's so fascinating. And also the same reviewer later, when they talk about the stories more specifically, they talk about heartbeats and have this, I don't know if it's a spoiler, so I won't say too much, but the reviewer talks about the end of this story called Heartbeats and views it in such a way that never would have occurred to me. It's really funny. I'm like, oh, that's not my idea of intimacy. I mean, it's totally great that that's what you think that those women wanted, but that's really interestingly not at all what they're after.
Yeah, I think for me that it's actually coming from inside the characters and their perspectives, that they're like wacky in certain ways, like in the, what is it, the Let Snails Go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, letting snails go.
Letting snails go.
Yeah. Like when she returns home for her high school reunion.
That's right. Yes, and picks up some snails from a parking lot and just pops them in her mouth and is kind of because
I think even it's like a way of, it's sort of, I guess, to me, this is just this one character's version of how to, I guess you could I don't know what people take, ketamine, whatever you do, right, to handle your anxiety.
Oh my God, these are snails, Nora.
I don't know.
They're gross. I was like, what is Nora thinking? This is disgusting.
Oh, see,
and then she pops them out again, puts them on the floor. Oh my God.
I think it's just a way, I think in my mind, I don't even know that I think that she thinks they're coming. They're covered in rain, which I guess is gross. But I mean, it's pouring rain. There are these snails. Yeah, that's so funny. It is gross. I don't think anyone should do it, but I just also think it's it's her extension of navigating the anxiety of the situation, which is entering an auditorium with all of these old high school friends and foes or whatever. And also it's her secret. I think there's something about fiction and writing where you get to have secrets, right? And these characters, you, the reader, get to share it with them. But not everyone in the auditorium knows about the snails in her mouth.
Sure. She is found out, though, and then, masturbates.
Yeah, she does. She does. That's true.
Which is another one of these moments where it seems like it would be a moment of intimacy, but it's also a moment of great kind of distance. These sort of delicious tensions running throughout the collection.
Yeah. I don't know, it's a whirlwind. It's a lot of different points in my life and different stories. And it's interesting to feel like each one of them is full in its own way. It's nice to think about them with you, Erin.
Well, I have one more kind of question since the Oscars just happened. If you were to pick one of these stories to be on the big stage, so as it were, which one would it be? I mean, I did think about Daycare. I was like, who would play fake Nora in Daycare?
Yeah, I like the idea of fake Nora. Yeah, so Us Fools, there is a director attached to it. And, those are some of the things that come up as who do you think would play Bernadette or Joanne Farrow, Bernie or Joe? I mean, do we get to be dreamy?
Yes.
Okay, if we can be
that's the point.
Okay, well, if I can be dreamy pants, I mean, who doesn't love a little Kate Blanchett? Dakota Johnson? That'd be cool.
I love that.
We live in a world where we don't have to look alike,
no.
Right? Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Josh was like, Jenny Slate would play fake Nora.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of energy. So you have a Salt Lake City reading coming.
I do.
At King's English.
It's April 6th. Yeah, the really kind of sneaky little thing about it is that it's the day before the book comes out, but they're going to have copies. Shh, shh.
So everyone come to King's English. It's at around 6?
It's 6:30. 6:30, we'll have some snacks and some like beverages. I think it'll be a good time. I mean, that's my goal. Like my goal, when Us Folks came out, Sylvia was like, what, just over 2. I felt a lot of like guilt. You know, my goal with this book is just to feel a lot of fun. Like I just want to have a good time.
Yes.
So come have a good time with us. Have a bite, have a sip of something, and get mischievous.
Yeah, and celebrate.
Yeah, celebrate.
Thanks, Nora.
Thank you, Erin.